When my son's name was called, I felt my heart swell. 13 years of late nights, scraped knees, science fair disasters, and pep talks, all leading to this moment. He walked up to the stage to accept the biggest award of the night, the Student of the Year. I was already tearing up when he reached for the mic. I thought I'd be recording his proudest moment. But then, from the front row, my ex-husband's new wife stood up, snatched the microphone from his hands, and smiled like the moment belonged to her. She turned to the crowd and said, "He only won because of my influence." And the room, God, the room, clapped. They clapped. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Not because I was okay, but because my son was still on that stage and I wouldn't let her take this moment from him. But then Jalen did something I didn't expect. He reached into his blazer, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and said, "Actually, I wrote a speech for my real role model." The gym fell silent. You could feel the air change, and that's when everything flipped. The gym was already packed when I arrived. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the hardwood floor, and families were crammed into every inch of space. Handmade posters hung on the walls with phrases like, "Shoot for the stars," and "We're proud of you." I found a seat in the third row, not too far back, not too close to the stage. I wanted to see everything but didn't need to be in the spotlight. I held my phone in my lap, camera app open, thumb hovering over the red button. I had been waiting for this night for months. Jalen had been nominated for Student of the Year, the school's highest honor. He didn't know if he would win, but I did. Not because I'm arrogant, but because I've watched this boy show up every single day with a kind heart and a sharp mind. He helped other kids with their homework even when he was tired. He picked up trash in the hallway because he said it made the school feel better. He's that kind of kid, and I'm that kind of mom. I'm Kendra Miles. I'm 38 years old. I teach at a local elementary school. I've been a single mom since Jalen was 7. His father, Darren, left shortly after we bought our first home together. He said he was unhappy and wanted a fresh start. Within a year, he was posting vacation photos with a woman named Talia. 3 years later, they were married. I've never said a bad word about them in front of Jalen. Not once. Even when he came home from their weekends together with expensive sneakers and stories about luxury restaurants, I stayed quiet. I didn't have the money or the lifestyle, but I had consistency. I had love that didn't disappear when it was inconvenient. Talia, on the other hand, made her presence loud. She's the kind of woman who shows up to PTA meetings with designer bags and talks like she's running a PR campaign. She posts pictures with Jalen on social media with hashtags like bonus mom and winning at stepmom life, even though she only sees him a few times a month. It never felt real. It felt like performance. Still, I never challenged her. I never corrected her when people assumed she was more involved than she was. I figured the truth didn't need defending. Jalen knew who had been there. But that night, as I sat in that gym, I noticed something. Darren and Talia were seated in the front row directly across from the stage. Talia was dressed in a red satin dress that clashed with the school's blue and white colors. She wore heels that clicked sharply against the gym floor and a thick gold bracelet that caught the light every time she moved. People glanced at her like she was the one giving the speech. Jalen was sitting with his class on the other side of the room. He looked so handsome in his navy blazer and pressed khakis. He caught my eye and gave me a small wave. I smiled and waved back, my heart racing. The principal stepped up to the microphone and began reading the names of students receiving awards. Applause followed each name, proud parents snapping photos, kids hugging teachers. It was beautiful, wholesome, the kind of night you wish you could bottle up forever. Then came the final announcement, and this year's Student of the Year award goes to Jalen Miles. I gasped and immediately hit record on my phone. The room burst into applause. I stood up and clapped as hard as I could, my eyes blurry with tears. Jalen stood, clearly stunned, and walked toward the stage. The principal handed him a plaque and a microphone. He looked out at the audience, then down at the note in his hand. I could see the paper shake slightly. I leaned forward in my chair. I was ready to hear my son thank his teachers, his friends, maybe even mention the hard work he put in. I was ready to cry. I was ready to remember this moment for the rest of my life. But I never got to hear that speech, not then. Because just as Jalen raised the mic to speak, Talia stood up, stepped forward, and grabbed it from his hand with a laugh like she was part of a comedy routine. I froze. She turned to the audience and smiled. I just want to say something real quick. Jalen wouldn't be standing here today without me, my influence, my standards. I've helped shape him. This is my win, too. And then the clapping started. It wasn't everyone, but it was loud. I looked around, stunned. People were actually clapping. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I held my phone steady, forced a smile onto my face, and waited for my son to get that microphone back. Inside, I was holding 1,000 pieces of myself together, because I had a feeling this night wasn't over, not by a long shot. For a few seconds, no one said anything. The room seemed to freeze in time. Talia stood on that stage, smiling like she had just been handed the award herself. She held the microphone with one hand and rested the other on her hip, like she was waiting for applause. And it came. Hesitant at first, then stronger. People actually clapped. Parents, teachers, students, some out of confusion, some out of habit, maybe even some who believed her. I sat in my seat, forcing my jaw to stay shut. My hands were locked in my lap, fingers clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palm. I could feel the burn in my eyes, the pressure building in my throat, but I didn't cry. I didn't move. I kept the phone steady in my hand. If I stood up now, if I spoke, it would become about me, and I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Jalen stood just behind her, frozen, his arms at his sides. His expression didn't change, but his eyes scanned the crowd. He looked unsure, caught in the spotlight, but robbed of his voice. He was 13, but in that moment, he looked younger, vulnerable, like a kid who wanted to disappear. Talia looked down at him and gave him a quick pat on the shoulder before turning back to the audience. "I've always believed in high standards," she said, like she was giving a TED Talk. "And when I came into Jalen's life, I brought structure, discipline, and values. I knew he could be great if someone pushed him." My stomach turned. She hadn't packed his lunches. She hadn't sat through IEP meetings when the school thought he was struggling with focus. She wasn't the one who found the math tutor or stayed up until midnight helping him rewrite his science fair paper when the volcano exploded in the backseat of my car. She wasn't there when he cried in my arms after his dad forgot to show up to his basketball game. But now, here she was, claiming credit for a child she barely knew beyond photo ops. People around me whispered. I heard one mother behind me say, "Isn't that the stepmom?" Another voice added, "She's always on Instagram with him." Maybe she really helped. And just like that, my silence started to feel like permission for them to rewrite the truth. I wanted to scream, not because I needed recognition, but because I knew how much Jalen had overcome, and I refused to let someone else twist that story into their own performance. I looked at Darren. He sat in the front row, staring at his shoes. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And in a strange way, that told me everything. He wasn't proud of her. He was embarrassed. Talia handed the microphone back to the principal and walked off stage, head held high. She sat down next to Darren, crossed her legs, and leaned back like she had just completed a victory lap. Jalen stepped forward again, the principal handing him the mic with a sympathetic smile. He looked down at the folded piece of paper in his hand, then up at the crowd. He wasn't shaking anymore. He stood tall, shoulders squared, but his voice was quiet when he spoke. "Actually," he said, pausing just long enough to be heard, "I wrote something I want to say." There was a shift in the room. The applause stopped. The whispers fell away. All eyes turned to him. He unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing the creases with his fingers. I could see his lips moving as he reread the first line to himself, steadying his breath. In that moment, I realized he hadn't just prepared a thank you speech. He had written a tribute, a truth. And I didn't know what he was about to say, but I could feel it. This wasn't just a kid giving thanks. This was a boy ready to remind the world who had really been there for him. The air in the room thickened. People leaned in. Talia glanced over, her smile still frozen in place, but her fingers started fidgeting with her bracelet. Jalen looked out across the crowd. Then he found me. Our eyes locked, and without saying a word, I knew he was about to reclaim what had almost been taken. Jalen didn't rush. He stood with the calm of someone who knew exactly what he needed to say, even if the room wasn't ready to hear it. His fingers stopped fidgeting with the paper. His voice came steady. "This is something I wrote at home. I wasn't sure if I'd get a chance to read it, but I think I should." He paused just long enough for the room to fall completely quiet. No movement, no shifting. Even the principal folded her hands and stepped back. I had never seen a middle school gym so still. Jalen cleared his throat. "I want to thank the person who helped me become who I am, someone who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, someone who never missed a parent-teacher conference, who helped me study when I was failing, who sat beside me when I thought I wasn't smart enough, the person who showed me what strength looks like, not by saying it, but by living it." My breath caught. He hadn't said my name yet, but I could feel where it was going. Still, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I held the phone as still as I could and tried to stay in the moment. Jalen kept going, louder now. "I love my dad, and I'm grateful for the people in my life. But the person who raised me, the one who showed up every single day, is my mom. Kendra Miles." His voice didn't shake. He didn't stumble. He stood there, a 13-year-old boy, owning the microphone with more poise than many adults ever could. She never asked for credit. She never tried to make it about her. She just did the work. She stayed when things got hard. She's the reason I even believed I could win something like this, so I want to dedicate this award to her. She's my real role model. I felt the tears rise, but I didn't wipe them away. I wanted Jalen to see me exactly as I was, proud, grateful, and finally seen. Around me, the silence broke. A single clap, then another. Then a wave of applause rolled through the gym. It wasn't like the awkward clapping from earlier. This was full, open, unmistakable. It wasn't polite. It was earned. People started turning in their seats to look at me. A few parents nodded. One of the teachers gave me a soft smile. I didn't stand. I didn't need to. My son had already put me center stage in the only way that mattered. On stage, Jalen folded his paper, handed the mic back to the principal, and walked down the steps. He didn't even glance toward Talia or Darren. He came straight to me. When he reached me, he didn't say anything right away. He just hugged me. Tight. Longer than any hug I'd gotten in years. I held him like I was holding everything we'd fought through. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. I pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "I love you too. So much." When we finally sat down, I could feel the energy in the room shift. People around us were still clapping as the next student was called, but their eyes kept drifting back toward us. I didn't need the attention. I didn't care about being noticed. What mattered was that Jalen had spoken his truth. Not for drama, not for revenge, just because it was time. I glanced toward the front rows, and Darren was clapping along with the crowd, but his face was unreadable. Talia sat stiff, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her smile had vanished. The truth is, I hadn't come to that ceremony expecting to be acknowledged. I came to cheer for my son. I had been doing that since the day he was born, through good grades and bad weeks, through heartbreak and homework and everything in between. But Jalen had decided, on his own, that silence wasn't enough anymore. He saw what happened. He felt the weight of someone else trying to hijack his moment. And instead of shrinking, he stood taller. That was the moment everything shifted. He didn't just stand up for me. He stood up for himself, for his story, for the truth. And he didn't need a mic to do it. But when he had one, he used it better than anyone else in that gym. Jalen had taken his seat next to me, but the room hadn't settled. It felt like everyone was still processing what had just happened. A few parents turned around to glance at me again, offering quick nods or faint smiles. One of Jalen's teachers, Mr. Callahan, gave him a subtle thumbs up from across the aisle. The next few award presentations continued, but they felt like background noise. I watched the stage, but my mind was still replaying Jalen's words, each one echoing louder than the last. My real role model, my mom. The applause he had received was different. It wasn't loud just because people were impressed. It was loud because something real had been said in a place that had almost allowed something fake to take over. When the ceremony ended, people stood and started moving toward the stage to take pictures with their kids. Jalen looked at me. "Do you want a photo?" he asked. "You're the star," I said, smiling. "It's your choice?" "I want one with you," he said. "Just us." He pulled me toward the side of the gym, where the Student of the Year banner hung near the bleachers. The school mascot was painted on the wall behind it. a fierce-looking falcon that Jalen always said looked more like a confused pigeon. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, and he held his plaque in one hand while balancing my phone with the other. We smiled. Click. After the photo, Jalen reached into his backpack and pulled out the folded speech again. "I want you to keep this," he said, handing it to me. I took it carefully, smoothing it out again and reading the lines one more time. My chest tightened. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The calm conviction, the clarity. He hadn't read those words to impress anyone. He had read them to reclaim the truth. As we walked toward the exit, I noticed Darren and Talia standing near the gym doors. They weren't speaking. Darren looked like he wanted to. Talia was scrolling through her phone, her lips pressed in a tight line. Jalen looked up at me. "Do I have to go talk to them?" he asked. "That's up to you," I said. "No pressure from me." He paused for a moment, then nodded. He walked over to them, and I stood a few feet away, giving him space. I watched as he spoke quietly to his dad. Darren nodded, said something back, and gave him a pat on the shoulder. Talia stayed quiet. She didn't say anything. She just watched him, with a forced smile, then turned her head away. Jalen walked back to me. His expression didn't change, but his pace quickened. When he reached me, he looked up again. "I just said, 'Thank you for coming,'" he said. "That's all I needed to say." I nodded. "You handled it well." He nodded back. "She looked mad." "She probably wasn't expecting honesty," I said. "You told the truth. That's all you can do." Outside the gym, the air was cool and crisp. The parking lot was lit by tall floodlights, and the sky above was the color of ink. We walked to the car in silence. Jalen carried his plaque tucked under one arm, his backpack slung low over his shoulder. When we got home, I made popcorn like I had promised him earlier in the week. We sat on the couch, our shoes kicked off, socks half off, the award leaning against the coffee table. Jalen reached over, grabbed it, and handed it to me. "I want you to put this wherever you want," he said. "It's yours, too." I didn't speak for a moment. I just held the plaque in my hands, running my fingers over the engraved letters. Student of the Year, Jalen Miles. "I'll find the perfect spot," I said. We stayed on the couch for a while, watching some cooking show he liked, neither of us paying much attention. My heart felt full in a way I hadn't let it feel in years. Not because I had been publicly thanked, not because anyone finally saw my work, but because my son had. He saw it. He saw me. That moment on the stage had been more than a comeback. It was a reckoning, a quiet truth spoken clearly in front of everyone who needed to hear it. And he chose me. Not just in private, but when it mattered. That was the win. The plaque sits on the shelf above our television now, not in a case or behind glass, just sitting there next to a photo of Jalen at 6 years old, missing 2 front teeth, and holding a soccer trophy almost as big as his torso. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it, not because of what it says, but because of what it represents. For years, I moved through motherhood like I was invisible. I didn't have time for recognition or praise. I worked, I showed up, I kept promises. I held Jalen through stomach flu nights and pushed through exhaustion to help him finish homework. I turned down promotions so I could pick him up from school. I budgeted every grocery bill like a puzzle, and through it all, I never asked for thanks. I didn't think I needed it. But that night in the gym, I learned something I didn't expect. Being seen matters. Not by the world, not by people scrolling through curated lives on social media, but by the one person you've poured everything into. When your child sees you, really sees you, not just as the one who drives them to practice or signs permission slips, but as someone who held up their entire world with nothing but sheer will that changes something deep inside. Jalen's words were more than a thank you. They were proof. Proof that I wasn't just surviving all those years. I was building something lasting, something real. The Monday after the ceremony, I walked into my classroom and one of my coworkers pulled me aside. "I heard about what your son said," she whispered, smiling. "It was all over the teacher group chat." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "I didn't even know people noticed." "Oh, they noticed," she said. "We were all cheering for you." That's when it hit me again. How often do women like me, single mothers, quiet workers, the ones in the background, get seen for the impact they make? We don't get standing ovations. We get grocery store runs at midnight and texts from school asking for emergency snacks. But sometimes, when we least expect it, someone throws a spotlight our way and says, "This is who's been holding the weight." That spotlight didn't come from a stage. It came from a 13-year-old boy who understood the truth. A boy who could have stayed quiet but chose to speak. Since that night, a few things have shifted. Jalen walks a little taller now. He's always been kind, but there's a new confidence in him. The kind that comes from knowing you stood up for what was right and did it with grace. As for me, I haven't changed how I mother. I still pack his lunches, still make him redo messy homework, still remind him to clean under his bed. But something inside feels steadier, more affirmed. I don't second guess myself as much. I don't wonder if I'm doing enough. I know I am. The truth is, Talia's interruption gave Jalen an unexpected choice. He could have let the moment pass. He could have stood quietly and read the version of his speech that everyone expected. But he chose something braver. He chose to tell the truth in a room full of people who might not have understood the full story. He took back a moment that almost got stolen. And in doing that, he gave me something I hadn't realized I needed. Recognition not as a perfect parent, but as a present one. The kind who showed up, who stayed, who mattered. Some people think moments like that only happen in movies, but they don't. They happen in middle school gyms, in quiet houses with microwaved popcorn, in teenage voices cracking with emotion as they name the people who shaped them. They happen when love finally gets a microphone. That night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about a mother and her son standing in the truth they had built together. It was about knowing that real love doesn't ask for the stage, but sometimes it gets handed one anyway, and when it does, it speaks clearly. Because it remembers every night it wasn't seen, and it shines, not in anger, but in gratitude. That was Jalen's moment, but in his words, he gave part of it back to me, and I will carry that forever. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of someone in your life who quietly shows up and gives everything they have without ever asking for credit, share it with them. Let them know they're seen. Leave a comment and tell me, who's your real role model? I read every single one, and your stories matter here. And if you felt something real while watching, hit that like button. It helps more people find this story. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories that don't just entertain, but stay with you. Thank you for spending your time here. It means more than you know.